Is just learning that Boehner, Pelosi, Reid, and McConnell are going to be at the White House coming up this afternoon at 5:30 to talk about this. We have Congressman Sean Duffy of Wisconsin joining me. Sir, I'm just getting this information. It's great to have you on. Let me get your response to that, though. Again, it's just crossing my desk that the four leaders are going to be at the White House. Is that a positive move in the right direction?
Listen, absolutely. The president had been talking about how he doesn't want to negotiate, doesn't want to talk. He had drawn a line in the sand. I think this is a really positive development. The only way you get two sides with different opinions to come together to find resolution, to find common ground, is when you communicate, when you have a dialogue. And so I would say absolutely kudos to the president for inviting the leaders of both chambers to the White House to start that conversation.
Okay, but to start that conversation, are you willing to accept, though, if the president's not going to negotiate and say that dealing with the budget of the country should not be tied to Obamacare? Are you willing to separate those two things?
Well, listen, I think that's an untenable position, especially when America understands how we've moved. Many of us don't like Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act, so we voted to defund it. Then we moved to have a wholesale delay for 1 year. But right now, I mean, the position that we have is the administration, Barack Obama and Jay Carney and their team should all be in Obamacare like the rest of America. If it's good for America and members of Congress, it should be good for the president and his team. We've asked for that. Then all we've asked for is that individuals get treated the same way as big businesses. They came to the Hill and lobbied for a 1 year delay in the requirements of Obamacare. We're asking to give that same delay to the individuals. Treat them fairly like you do the big businesses. They may not have as much money, but we should treat them equally.
Why delay ultimately, though? Congressman, why delay ultimately when this needs to be tested, when it needs to be rolled out? And the fact, that it passed through both houses of Congress in 2010. It's been vetted by the Supreme Court. The American people re-elected President Barack Obama back into office on the mandate that Obamacare was going to be law of the land, and the Senate remains Democratic-controlled. Now, while the House remains Republican-controlled, 2/3 of Washington is Democratically controlled. So why is it that Republicans are refusing to untie how to fund our government to what is the ACA? Why do those two have to be connected?
I want your viewers to understand, right now, the president's won. He can't take yes for an answer. We've said, okay, let the exchanges go up. Let Obamacare go forward. What the president did was he rolled when big business came to Washington and said, give big business in America a 1 year delay on the requirements of Obamacare. He did that unilaterally. We think just because small communities, small families in America, middle-class families in America, just because they don't have big lobbyists in Washington, just because they don't have a lot of money, doesn't mean they shouldn't be treated with that same delay for the requirements of Obamacare like he gave big businesses.
But don't you think, though, that the glitches and the fact that there's been such a rush for people to go out and vet what open enrollment means, what October 1st meant to so many millions of Americans, some reportedly over 4 million, that have gone individual clicks to test and learn about what Obamacare could mean for them come January 1st. Isn't that the sign that the country is interested in having access to affordable health care? And it's not just a privilege for those among us that are lucky enough to work for a big company or lucky enough to be able to afford it, but it should just be affordable for all Americans.
2 points. I never saw Jay Carney at the computer yesterday signing up for Obamacare because he's not. He's not in it. But, Thomas, what I'm concerned about is my families back in Wisconsin that are seeing their full-time jobs turn into part-time jobs. Listen, in Wisconsin, we're seeing numbers that our families and our young people are going to see a 77% increase in health care premiums. Those are the numbers that I'm concerned about, and that's because of this law, and that's been our concern. But listen, I want to see our government get back up and running. I want to see us come to a common consensus, and I'm even willing to say, let's do a 1 week extension. Let's open it up for a week as we can negotiate the finer points of the disagreement.
But doesn't that get to the whole point of the whole fight of kick the can down the road? Why can't we figure out a long game of how our country should run instead of these small piecemeal measures that really get nothing done?
But, Thomas, we do small piecemeal measures. That's the way the process works. We do appropriations bills throughout the summer of every year, and then we vote on those and pass them by the start of the calendar, which is October 1st. That hasn't happened because the Senate hasn't taken up those bills. So listen, this has been dysfunctional, but the bottom line is the president has to talk to people. He hasn't moved off any of his positions. He hasn't compromised. He hasn't communicated, even to the point where Democrats are saying, listen, we're not going to open up the open-air monuments. We're not going to open up the World War II monuments. This is the same mentality that gave us little kids who have done bake sales to raise money and come out to see the White House, but he shut it down because of sequester.
So you think we should pick winners and losers of who stays open and what federally gets funded and what doesn't? I mean, you support picking winners and losers?
No, what I support is an appropriations process that goes through systematically what we should fund. And what I think is...
Then why didn't House Republicans send conferees to negotiate with the House and Senate over the budget? Why didn't the House Republicans send conferees in the months leading up to this to negotiate the House and Senate budgets?
What I think we need to do is find points of agreement. And who disagrees that we should not open up our World War II museum?
But did House Republicans send conferees to negotiate? Did House Republicans send conferees to negotiate the House and Senate budgets in the months leading up to this? Did they or didn't they?
We have conferees ready to reopen up the government. That is the most critical thing right now, is to turn the lights back on and open the doors.
But did they or did they not meet in the months to come ahead of all of this?
Did the Senate send conferees? Did the Senate send conferees to meet us on our bill to open up the government, to keep a government running? They won't even send conferees to negotiate. That's a problem. Let me talk about the budget quickly, Thomas. One of the issues that we have is Republicans put out a budget that actually balances. Our concern with the Senate is they have a budget bill that never balances. It doesn't balance in 10 years, not 50 years, not 100 years. So how do you find agreement with someone who goes, I am never going to balance a budget. I won't tell America how much I want to spend and how much I want to raise your taxes. We're at least willing to say, this is tough stuff. But we'll put a budget out that balances and shows the American people how we do it. It's pretty hard when you're that far apart where they go, we won't even concede the point that we want to balance the budget. That's been our issue. Right now, we all want to keep the government open. We have that common ground.
But it's day 2 of the shutdown. Congressman, I have to run. We've gone a little long. It remains day 2 of the shutdown, but we did report that McConnell and Pelosi, Reid, and Boehner are all going to be at the White House coming up at 5:30 this afternoon. Congressman Sean Duffy, thanks for your time.